got used that when we talk about co-design or co-living, we usually think about humans. Sometimes we think about pets, and sometimes we think about our cars. But I think that now the time has become to start thinking also about non-biological livings, like IoT devices, but also maybe robots, humanoids, and it might change the scene a lot. So because first we have to understand how to interact with them, and secondly, they also need some rights. They also have to be protected. They also have to be take care of their comfortability among us as humans. So let's start watching. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Martin Tomitsch. I'm joining you from my home office here in Sydney, which is located on Gadigal land of the people of the Eora Nation. I'm a professor at the University of Sydney, and today I'm presenting our article, Non-Human Personas, Including Nature in the Participatory Design of Smart Cities. I'm presenting this article on behalf of my co-authors, Joel Fredericks, Dan Burr, and Jessica Frawley, who are also from the University of Sydney, and Markus Foth, who is from the Queensland University of Technology. Our article is grounded in and extends the notion of human-centered design, which has been used for decades now to inform the design of interactive applications. And it's also an approach that has also been adopted in smart cities. It's an approach that prioritizes human desires and comfort above everything else. And so our article is extending this approach by introducing and discussing how we can consider also non-human stakeholders and moving beyond human-centered design. The article is based on two observations. The first is that as designers, we have a responsibility to consider the impact of our designs on the environment and on ecosystems. And this is important because, as Mike Montero, the author of the book Ruined by Design, points out, the world is working exactly as designed. And it's not working very well, which means we need to do a better job of designing it. In a similar way, David Attenborough stated that the Australian wildfires and also other wildfires, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic, were a wake-up call, and that infectious diseases that come from animals are a sign of an unhealthy planet. So various scholars have explored and introduced and discussed alternative approaches, such as more than human participation and approaches for decentering the human, for example, when it comes to the design of collaborative cities. There are many different approaches and different notions using different terms that are currently being explored for extending this idea of human-centered design. But what many of these new approaches have in common is a focus on living systems. Through our article, we're introducing a method, the non-human personas method, in order to give designers the tools to be able to consider living systems when designing interactive applications. And in particular, we're demonstrating that in the article through the context of smart cities. Now, the second observation through which our article is motivated is based on our own work on smart cities and smart city applications, where we have designed interactive applications such as, for example, the Tetra bin, which you can see here in this video, which is an interactive application, an installation that encourages people to reduce littering in cities by turning the act of putting rubbish into a bin into a playful experience. Now, it wasn't until we deployed this installation on our campus for a field study that we realized that the installation also attracted ibises who were roaming the campus. And it turned out through that experience that we had really not considered how our digital intervention would interact with urban wildlife. Recently, I then found out that we're actually not the only ones being caught out by Australian urban wildlife and the interactions with digital applications in public space. I was chatting to Matt Boysker from Tektronix, which is one of our industry partners. They're a manufacturer of digital billboards based in South Dakota in the US. And so Matt told me that as they began to install more of their digital billboards across Australia, they realized that cockatoos really enjoyed taking the LEDs apart, causing significant damage. But the stories didn't end there. One of Decoding's technicians was surprised to find an iguana who had climbed up on the mesh structure and was hanging out at the top of the building, 25 meters up in the air. And they even encountered snakes, large snakes, using the media facade structure to climb up buildings. So if you look closely, you can see a snake right here on the edge of the building. So we engaged on a research project to investigate how we could consider non-human stakeholders in smart city applications from the outset. As a case study, we used a parklet design, which is commonly found in today's cities. And so we were setting out to design a parklet that also considered, in particular, possums as non-human primary users. So as part of the design process, we identified these stakeholders you can see on the screen. So both human users and a series of non-human users, not just possums, but also other non-human users or other representatives from the flora, the native flora and fauna that would be forming part of the natural ecosystem. And we represented those stakeholders then in this project through personas. Personas are a method that have been used for a long time in interaction design projects. And so, for example, you can see here on the left, a previously published example of a persona from a smart city project. And the personas are archetype user representations, or archetype representations of users. They're fictional representations, but they're based on real data about potential users. And so they typically are a descriptive narrative, represented descriptive narrative of potential users, so that they can then be used throughout the design process and allow us, for example, to check any design decision we make against the recorded user needs and desires. We, in a similar way, developed a template for non-human personas and included also different categories such as the needs and motivations, challenges and stressors, what their natural habitat is, and also a descriptive narrative of the behavior. We actually published this template as part of a recent book publication called Design, Think, Make, Break, Repeat, which is a collection of 80 methods, and non-human personas is included as one of the methods in that handbook. In our research study on parklets, we developed the personas based on secondary data, so based on data we found in reports and published papers. But in our article, we also present a theoretical framework for creating a coalition that would actually be able to come together and speak on behalf of the identified non-human stakeholders using what we refer to as a middle-out approach, which is something that we have developed with some of my co-authors through our previous work. In the article, we then present a framework for employing non-human personas, and we describe the 7 steps that are involved when using non-human personas in real projects. In the article, we also demonstrate this framework retrospectively by applying it to 2 of our previous smart city projects. If you want to learn more about our research and our projects, I first of all, of course, invite you to read the paper, but also to visit our respective research lab web pages. So at the University of Sydney, we are part of the Urban Interfaces Lab, and at Queensland University of Technology, we are part of the Modern Human Futures Research Group. And if you'd like to get in touch, you can find my contact details here on the slide. I've included my email address and also how to connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter.